The scariest thing about being human isn't dying. It's losing yourself while you're still alive. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, but you're just a passenger in your own body. You are completely conscious, watching through your own eyes as your hands do things you never intended them to do. You want to scream, you want to pull back, but the muscles refuse to listen. This is not a nightmare. This is the precise biological reality of zombie parasites. Right now, across every continent on Earth, billions of organisms are executing perfect, hostile takeovers of living brains. And today we are going to look at exactly how they do it, and what happens when that biological weaponry turns toward us. You are probably sitting there thinking, my brain is too complex to be hacked. It's a comforting thought. We tell ourselves that our advanced prefrontal cortex, our multi-layered blood-brain barrier, and our thousands of years of evolutionary dominance make our minds an impenetrable fortress. And you are right. Mostly. But nature didn't design a fortress. It designed a lock-and-key system. Every single emotion you experience, every single decision you make is just a chemical signal, a microscopic key turning in a cellular lock. What happens when an organism learns to forge those keys? They don't want to kill you. Killing you is a failure. If the host dies, the parasite's ride is over. They want to sit in the captain's chair. Over the next 20 minutes, we aren't just going to look at basic biology textbooks. We are charting a speculative future. We are going to examine the real-world evidence of behavioral manipulation, the mechanical horror of physical hijacking, and finally, the existential question. How close are we to a parasite that learns to turn human beings into biological puppets? To understand how a parasite can take over a brain, we first have to dismantle a foundational human myth. The myth of free will. We define our existence by our choices. You chose to wake up at a certain time today. You chose what to wear. You chose to click on this video, but if we peel back the skin and look into the gray matter of the human brain, we find that choice is a highly orchestrated illusion. Your brain is a massive, incredibly dense network of roughly 86 billion neurons. They communicate through chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. When you feel happy, it is because dopamine and serotonin are washing over specific receptors. When you feel fear, it is adrenaline and cortisol flooding your system. You do not consciously decide to feel afraid or hungry. Your brain receives a chemical prompt and creates the feeling. Your consciousness simply rationalizes it after the fact. Because this system relies entirely on chemistry, it is incredibly vulnerable. It means that whoever controls the chemicals controls the person. If an invading organism can find a way to cross the blood-brain barrier, the protective wall of cells that shields your brain from infections, it doesn't need to physically tear your brain apart. It doesn't need to act like a monster in a sci-fi film. It just needs to blend into the background. It needs to establish a home inside the tissue, find the neural pathways responsible for your deepest instincts, and start leaking its own custom chemicals into the mix. You wouldn't feel a foreign presence. You wouldn't hear a voice in your head telling you what to do. The takeover is far more insidious than that. The parasite would simply alter your desires. You would suddenly feel an intense, overwhelming urge to do something entirely against your own self-preservation, and you would walk toward your own destruction, believing with absolute certainty that it was entirely your own choice. If this sounds like an exaggerated thought experiment, you haven't been looking closely at the natural world. This technology already exists. It has been perfected over millions of years of evolution. Let us begin with the most famous yet widely misunderstood mind hijacker on Earth, Toxoplasma gondii. Toxoplasma is a single-celled protozoan parasite. It can infect almost any warm-blooded animal, but it has a fatal evolutionary limitation. It can only sexually reproduce inside the digestive tract of a domestic cat. This creates a massive geographical problem for the parasite. If it finds itself inside a mouse or a rat, it needs to find a way to get that rodent inside a cat's stomach. A healthy rat has a deeply hardwired evolutionary terror of cats. The moment a rat detects the scent of cat urine, its amygdala, the brain's emotional and fear processing center, fires rapidly. The rat freezes, hides, or flees. It is a survival mechanism that has kept rodents alive for millennia. The results are terrifying. When the infected rat smells cat urine, the fear pathway is entirely blocked. Instead, the parasite rewires the signal to fire the rat's sexual arousal pathways. The scent of its apex predator no longer signals death. It signals desire. The rat actively seeks out the cat. It wanders out into the open, completely calm, and waits to be eaten. The parasite has systematically turned a living, breathing animal into a suicidal delivery vehicle. Now consider the terrifying reality. Toxoplasma gondii doesn't just infect rodents. It currently resides inside the brains of roughly 1/3 of the entire human population. For decades, medical science assured us that toxoplasma was completely harmless to humans. We were told that our immune systems kept it locked away in a dormant state inside our muscle and brain tissue. But over the last 15 years, a growing mountain of neurological data has begun to paint a much darker picture. Statistical analyses have consistently shown that humans infected with toxoplasma experience subtle yet measurable behavioral changes. Infected individuals are statistically twice as likely to be involved in high-speed traffic accidents. They exhibit significantly higher rates of risk-taking behavior, elevated levels of raw aggression, and a higher incidence of schizophrenia and severe depression. We like to believe that our massive brains and our complex consciousness protect us from the strings of a puppet master. But down at the molecular level, a mammalian neuron is a mammalian neuron. If a single-celled organism can dismantle the primal fear of death in a rodent, we must accept an uncomfortable truth. Our behavior is already being altered by passengers we didn't invite inside. Altering a host's desires through chemical trickery is highly effective, but it is not the only way to hijack a body. There is a far more brutal, mechanical horror waiting in the undergrowth of our planet. A horror that proves you don't even need to control a brain to control a body. Look at the Ophiocordyceps unilateralis fungus, often referred to as the zombie ant fungus. When a cordyceps spore lands on a carpenter ant in the tropical rainforest, it secretes specialized enzymes to burn a hole through the ant's hard outer exoskeleton. Once inside, the fungus begins to grow, feeding on the ant's non-essential organs. But it doesn't just grow randomly. It multiplies into a massive, interconnected cellular network that wraps entirely around the ant's muscles. As the infection reaches its peak, the ant exhibits what biologists call the death march. It leaves its colony completely detached from its social instincts. It climbs up the stem of a plant, stops at a precise height of exactly 25 centimeters above the forest floor, moves to the underside of a leaf facing north, and bites down on the main vein with a permanent, unbreakable jaw lock. The ant dies in this position. The fungus then consumes the rest of the internal organs and sprouts a long, horrific fruiting body directly through the back of the ant's head, raining down millions of new spores onto the colony below to repeat the cycle. For over a century, scientists assumed that cordyceps achieved this by invading the ant's brain and commanding it, like a computer. But in recent years, researchers at Penn State University utilized advanced electron microscopy and 3D tissue imaging to look inside the infected ants. What they discovered is a level of psychological horror that rivals any work of fiction. Cordyceps does not enter the ant's brain. The brain is left completely untouched, pristine and healthy, sitting at the center of a horrific web. Instead, the fungal cells form a physical, mechanical network throughout the ant's body, literally cutting the communication lines between the ant's brain and its nervous system. The fungus injects chemical cocktails directly into the limbs, forcing the muscles to contract and move. Think about what this means. The ant's brain is not asleep. It is not brainwashed. The ant is fully conscious, trapped inside its own body, screaming silently behind its own eyes, as its legs are mechanically operated by a fungal invader. It is a passenger in a vehicle that has been utterly stolen from it. Now, let us push this concept up the evolutionary ladder. What happens when this level of mechanical invasion meets a more complex organism? We see glimpses of it in the Hymenoepimesis argyrophaga wasp. This parasite lays its egg on the abdomen of a spider. When the wasp larva hatches, it injects a specific chemical cocktail into the spider's nervous system. The spider completely stops building its normal, beautiful web for catching prey. Instead, it spends hours building an entirely new, incredibly reinforced, heavily structured web designed specifically to support the weight of the wasp's heavy cocoon. The spider uses its incredible web-weaving expertise, its lifelong specialized skill, to build the very gallows where it will be eaten alive by the larva. The horror of these organisms isn't just that they destroy life. It is that they weaponize the host's own anatomy, intelligence, and skills against them. They turn your own strengths into the tools of your enslavement. We live in an era of absolute biological complacency. We look back at the history of diseases, the plagues, the viruses, the bacterial infections, and we congratulate ourselves on our medical progress. We have antibiotics, we have vaccines, we have clean water. We believe we have conquered the microscopic world. But parasites do not play by the rules of traditional disease. They do not want to wipe us out. They adapt. They evolve. And right now, the boundaries of our world are shifting in ways that should terrify anyone paying attention. We are currently witnessing the rapid melting of global permafrost, layers of ancient ice that have remained frozen for hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of years. Deep within that ice lie dormant, prehistoric pathogens. These are organisms that evolved in a world long before humans walked the earth. Organisms that our modern immune systems have never encountered, never cataloged, and have absolutely no defense against. At the same time, our world is becoming saturated with synthetic chemicals, pharmaceuticals, and microplastics. We are forcing the microscopic life around us to mutate at an unprecedented, unnatural speed just to survive. What happens when an ancient deep ice parasite reemerges, or a modern protozoan undergoes a radical mutation and bridges the evolutionary gap to humans? What happens when a parasite combines the chemical stealth of toxoplasma with the physical, muscle-controlling precision of cordyceps? It wouldn't look like a Hollywood zombie movie. There would be no cinematic chaos. There would be no frantic screaming, no flesh-eating monsters sprinting down city streets, no sudden societal collapse that gives you a chance to fight back. Evolution is quiet. Evolution is efficient. The real future horror of a human brain-controlling parasite would be entirely silent. It would start with a subtle shift in your personality. You might wake up one morning with a strange, inexplicable craving for a food you've hated your entire life. You might find yourself feeling an unusual, intense comfort in the dark, or a sudden, overwhelming urge to walk out of your house in the middle of the night just to stand beneath the open sky. You might feel a sudden magnetic draw toward high places, an intoxicating desire to stand on the very edge of a bridge, looking down at the water below. You would look at your reflection in the mirror and everything would look exactly the same. Your skin would be intact. Your eyes would look like your eyes. You would feel completely calm, completely clear-headed. You would tell yourself that you are just stressed, or that you are simply trying new things, or that it was entirely your own idea to stand on that ledge. But deep within the dark, wet folds of your gray matter, billions of microscopic entities would be huddled around your synapses. They would be quietly forging your biological keys, whispering chemical commands to your neurons, and systematically redrawing the boundaries of who you are. You wouldn't even have the chance to fight back because you wouldn't know there was an enemy to fight. You would simply watch your hands move, completely unaware that someone else is holding the steering wheel. Take a deep breath. Look at your hands. Move your fingers. Are you entirely sure you were the one who decided to do that? If you want to continue uncovering the invisible forces, the hidden biology, and the quiet nightmares shaping the future of speculative horror, stay close, sleep well. If you are still in control of your fingers, hit the subscribe button below, before something else decides to do it for you.